If you've been following this channel, you know I mention flood zones in almost every single video. The cost of living video, the pros and cons video, even the neighborhood breakdown. And every time I said I have a full video on this. This is that video. Here's why I keep bringing it up. Flood zones in Charleston are the single most misunderstood part of buying a home here. And getting it wrong doesn't just cost you money at closing, it can cost you thousands of dollars every single year for as long as you own the property. I'm going to walk you through exactly how flood zones work in Charleston, what the different designations actually mean for your wallet, and the process I go through with every single client before we write a single offer. I also want to share something personal because I've lived in various areas in Charleston, all in the same flood zone, and experienced way different flooding in each area. Before we get into zones and insurance numbers, I want to address something head on. A common misconception is that you can find a home in Charleston that is completely free from flood zones. You cannot. All of Charleston is classified as a flood zone. We're in the low country. Every street, every neighborhood, it's never a question, you are in a flood zone. The question is always, which one? And what does that really mean for you? And there's one more thing worth knowing up front. Your standard homeowner's insurance policy does not cover flood damage, not a dollar of it. Flood coverage is completely separate. Depending on your zone, it can range from a modest line item to one of the biggest ongoing costs of owning your home. Understanding this before you start shopping is the difference between finding a home that fits your budget and discovering 6 weeks into a purchase that your monthly payment is several $100s higher than you planned for. Zone X is the lowest risk. Zone X is what you're looking for if minimizing flood risk and insurance cost is a priority. It sits outside the special flood hazard area, meaning there's a less than 1% annual chance of flooding at that location. Lenders typically don't require flood insurance on Zone X properties, which makes it attractive. But here's the important nuance. Roughly 25% of all flood insurance claims nationwide come from low to moderate risk areas. Flood can happen anywhere. Zone X means lower risk, not zero risk. My strong recommendation in Zone X is to buy a policy anyway. You're looking at around $400 to $500 to have peace of mind. Zone AE is the high-risk zone. Zone AE is the designation you'll encounter most often in parts of Charleston that get the most attention. Downtown, waterfront properties, areas near tidal creeks and rivers. It sits inside the special flood zone area, meaning there's a 1% or greater annual chance of flooding, which adds up to roughly a 20% chance of flooding over the life of a 30-year mortgage. If you have a federally backed mortgage in Zone AE, flood insurance is not optional. It's required. And the cost is real. Policies in Zone AE typically run $600 to $1,800 or more annually, depending on the home's elevation, its foundation type, and the coverage amount. Older homes without elevation certificates or homes where the floor sits below the base flood elevation can run significantly higher. The most important thing to know about Zone AE, not all AE properties are created equal. Foundation type matters enormously here. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Zone VE is the highest designation, the coastal high hazard areas subject to wave action in addition to flooding. You'll see this in oceanfront and beachfront properties. They've got the strictest building codes, highest premiums, most restriction on new construction. If a property is in Zone VE, you need a very clear picture of what insurance costs before you go any further. Here's what I tell every client the moment flood zones come up. If flood risk worries you, avoid homes built on slab. Let me explain why that matters. A slab on-grade home sits directly on a concrete pad at ground level. There's no space between the ground and your floor in a flood event. Water that enters the home has nowhere to go. Damage tends to be immediate and significant. With a crawl space foundation, a crawl space raises the home slightly off the ground, typically 18 inches to a few feet. It provides a buffer. Water can move beneath the home without necessarily entering the living spaces. It's also easier to install and service mechanical systems, which matters for long-term maintenance in humid climates like Charleston. Both of my own homes are on crawl spaces, and in both cases, neither home has ever flooded internally. An elevated home, often called drive under, where the ground level is open parking and the living space starts on the second floor, provides the most protection and typically the lowest flood insurance premium of any foundation type in a high-risk zone. If you're shopping in Zone AE and an elevated home is an option, the insurance savings over years can be substantial. Now, this is what it actually looks like in my two homes. I want to get personal here for a moment because I think this is more useful than any chart. I have a home in downtown Charleston. I lived there for 4 years and now it's a rental property. You hear about flooding the most in downtown. This home is in the Upper Peninsula of downtown in flood zone moderate. The moderate zone sits between Zone X and Zone AE high risk, and the home has never flooded, not once. But here's what actually living there looked like. After a large storm, the backyard would have 5 or so inches of standing water that sticks around for days, sometimes even 2 weeks. My street didn't flood, but a few streets nearby would. You'd have standing water, usually just that day, maybe a day or two, where you wouldn't really want to drive through those roads. And I learned very quickly which streets those were because the city updates a road closure map for every storm event, and you get to know your area pretty well. Here's something I find fascinating about downtown Charleston that most people don't know. If you look up a historical map of old Charleston, you can see where canals and creeks used to run throughout the peninsula. Over time, roads and developments were built over those original waterways. And to this day, those are almost always the streets that flood. The water is following the path it always followed. It just has pavement over it now. The Lower Peninsula is the most well-known flooding area. During major tidal events, the city opens parking garages for free so residents can get their cars off the street and above water level. People use sandbags at entry points to protect their home. It's just part of downtown living, not a crisis, just a reality that people who live there plan for. Now, where I currently live is in West Ashley, also in zone moderate, the same as my house downtown, also on a crawl space. However, I have a French drain system here to move water out to the street. This home has also never flooded. During storms, there was some pooling in the backyard, but it cleared quickly, nothing like what I'd see downtown. The French drain really made a meaningful difference here. What both homes have taught me: zone designation tells you the risk category. Foundation type tells you what happens during an actual event, and local knowledge about which streets, which blocks, and which drainage systems tells you the rest. So this is how I protect buyers through the process. Now, let me walk you through exactly what I do with every client before we write an offer on a Charleston property, because this is where a good agent earns their keep. Step 1, flood zone check before you fall in love. Before we get emotionally attached to any property, we check the flood zone designation. You can look this up yourself on FEMA's Map Service Center using the property address. It's publicly available and free. I do this for every home we consider. It takes 2 minutes and can save you from a very expensive surprise. Step 2, insurance estimate before making an offer. If a property is in Zone AE or higher, I strongly recommend getting a flood insurance estimate before going under contract, not after. Once you're under contract, you're on a timeline. Getting the insurance number before your offer means you know your true monthly costs going in. No surprises at closing. And if you're buying a property with an existing policy, ask about assuming the seller's flood policy. In some cases, you can inherit a favorable rate that may be cheaper than starting a new one. Step 3, seller's disclosure review. Sellers in South Carolina are legally required to disclose any known flooding that has occurred on the property while they owned it. We also request and review the disclosure from the previous owner if it's available. This gives us a history of what the property has actually experienced, not just what zone it's in. Step 4, home inspection with drainage focus. During the inspection, a good inspector will check the grade of the property, meaning which direction water flows when it rains. Any slope toward the home is a red flag. They also look for signs of previous water intrusion, staining, effervescence on the foundation, musty crawl space, soft spots in the floor, Remember, these are the physical clues that tell you what the property has actually experienced. Step 5, setting expectations before closing. Depending on the zone and what we find, I have specific conversations with every buyer about what to expect during storm season. Which streets near them tend to flood, how the drainage in their area works, what routine preparation looks like. The goal is that there are no surprises after closing. None of my clients have come back to me post-closing with flood shock, because we've done this work up front. Now here's the discount you may not know about. This is worth knowing. The city of Charleston participates in FEMA's Community Rating System, a program that rewards communities who go above the minimum flood management requirements. Charleston currently holds a rating of 6, which translates to a 20% discount on NFIP flood insurance premiums for properties within city limits. That discount is automatic if you're buying within the city of Charleston boundaries. It's not huge, but on a $1,500 annual premium, 20% is $300 back in your pocket every year. The bottom line, flooding in Charleston is real. It's manageable, and it does not have to be a deal breaker, not if you understand what you're buying before you buy it. Zone X with a crawl space in a neighborhood with good drainage is a very different conversation than Zone AE with a slab on a street that has historically flooded. Both are legal to purchase. Both can be wonderful homes, but they come with a completely different cost structure and completely different day-to-day experiences. My job and the whole point of this video is to make sure you know which one you're getting into before you sign anything. If you want to check the flood zone of a specific property you're considering, the FEMA Map Service Center is free and public. Just search FEMA Flood Map and plug in the address. It will tell you the zone in seconds. If you're struggling to find it, just text me flood and I'll send you the link. And if you want to talk through what that zone means for a specific home, the budget, the insurance, the foundation, all of it, that's exactly the conversation I have with buyers every week. Hit the Calendly link in the description and let's get on a call. My free Charleston home buyers guide is also in a link below. Go ahead and download it so you can get an idea of what buying in Charleston actually looks like. If you haven't seen the rest of the series yet, the cost of living, the New York comparison, a neighborhood breakdown, and the full pros and cons, they're all linked in the description and on the end screen. I'm Justine Manuel, and I'll see you in the next one.